Brought to you by WikiVidi.com. Air Berlin. Air Berlin PLC is Germany's second-largest airline after Lufthansa, and Europe's seventh-largest airline in terms of passengers carried. It maintains hubs at Berlin Tegel Airport and Düsseldorf Airport, and serves 12 German cities as well as destinations in Europe and the USA. Air Berlin is a member of the Oneworld alliance, and owns the subsidiary Belair in Switzerland, while the sale of its 49% stake Austrian subsidiary NIKI to Etihad Airways was announced in December 2016. It is listed on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange. Etihad Airways is the largest shareholder, having increased its shareholding to 29.21% in 2011. Air Berlin is headquartered in Charlottenburg-Wilmersdorf, a borough of Berlin. On 15 August 2017, Air Berlin stated it was filing for insolvency, but that flights would continue until further notice, in part thanks to a loan provided by the German government. On 9 October 2017, however, Air Berlin announced that it would cease all of its own operations by 28 October 2017. 19781990, American charter airline in West Berlin. Originally registered as Air Berlin USA, the company was founded in 1978 as a wholly owned subsidiary of Belair Co., an American agricultural enterprise headquartered in Oregon, to operate charter flights on behalf of German tour operators from Berlin Tegel Airport, mostly to Mediterranean holiday resorts. The co-founders of Air Berlin USA were: Belair Co. was the agriculture business of Kim Lundgren's family in the United States. As a United States airline, Air Berlin was able to access the West Berlin airline market. During the Cold War, Berlin's special political status meant that the air corridors into and out of Tegel Airport could only be used by airlines registered in France, the United Kingdom, or the United States. The airline's headquarters were initially at Tegel Airport. Leonard Lundgren was the first chairman. After the company was issued an airline license and acquired two Boeing 707 jet airliners previously owned by Transworld Airlines, Air Berlin USA commenced revenue services on 28 April 1979 with a flight from Berlin Tegel to Palma de Mallorca. Plans were made to start long-haul flights on West Berlin-Brussels, Florida routes in cooperation with Air Florida. In 1980, the Air Berlin USA fleet grew to include the Boeing 737-200, when two aircraft of that type were leased from Air Florida. In 1981, Air Berlin USA was continuing to operate scheduled transatlantic Boeing 707 service on a weekly routing of Berlin Tegel Airport, Brussels, Orlando. However, by 1982 the 707s had been phased out, and during most of the 1980s, Air Berlin USA operated only a single 737,200 or a 737,300. In 1990 and 1991, two modern Boeing 737-400s were also placed into service. 1990-2000, new owners and the start of low-cost flights. German reunification led to significant changes to the Berlin aviation market, since German airlines gained access to the city. In 1991, Air Berlin was bought by Joachim Hunold, a former sales and marketing director with LTU International, and restructured as Air Berlin GmbH. Following an order for 10 Boeing 737-800, Air Berlin grew, and by 1999, the fleet comprised 12 aircraft. In 2001, Air Berlin and Hapag-Lloyd became the first airlines in the world to have their Boeing 737-800s fitted with blended winglet wingtip devices that are intended to improve fuel efficiency. Air Berlin introduced scheduled flights in 1997, initially linking a number of secondary German airports to Mallorca. By 2002, 35% of Air Berlin's tickets were sold directly. In the same year, the route network grew to include destinations other than typical holiday resorts. Low-fare flights to London, Barcelona, Milan and Vienna started. They were marketed as city shuttle. Besides Berlin Tegel, these routes were opened at 6 German airports that until then had not been served by one of the rising European low-cost carriers, in what later would become a hallmark for Air Berlin as a semi-low-cost carrier. The airline offered complimentary meals and seat reservations. This was something its competitors Buzz Hapag-Lloyd Express, Ryanair, and Virgin Express did not do. 2006, becoming Germany's second-largest airline. In November 2001, the delivery flight of Boeing 737-800 fitted with winglets set a record. The aircraft, with the registration code DABBC, flew 8,345 kilometers non-stop from Seattle, USA to Berlin, Germany in 9 hours 10 minutes. In January 2004, Air Berlin announced it would cooperate with NIKI, a Vienna-based airline. As part of the deal, Air Berlin took a 24% stake in NIKI. In 2005, Air Berlin signed a partnership agreement with Germania. As part of the deal, Air Berlin leased some of Germania's aircraft and crew, and Germania became almost exclusively a charter airline. Plans were made for Germania to be associated with Air Berlin under a management contract. However, the contract was not signed. At the beginning of March 2008, Germania's joint owners could not reach agreement on the takeover by Air Berlin, so Germania remained an independent airline. A joint Air Berlin-Germania subsidiary dubbed Air Zurich and planned to be based at Zurich Airport was proposed in 2005 but did not materialize. In 2005, the group reorganized its corporate structure. It established Air Berlin PLC, into which it reversed Air Berlin GmbH and subsidiaries. It was suggested that the reason for the group to establish a UK-based PLC instead of German-based AG was to avoid the need to have a supervisory board and employee representation as required by the German law of Mitbestimmung, a co-determination. In 2006, Air Berlin went public on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange, originally scheduled for the 5th of May 2006. The IPO was postponed to the 11th of May 2006. The company said the delay was due to rises in fuel costs and other market pressures limiting investor demand. It reduced the initial share price range from 15.0 €17.5 to 11.5 €14.5. The stock opened at €12, selling a total of 42.5 million shares. Of these, 19.6 million were new shares, increasing capital in the company, and the remainder to repay loans extended by the original shareholders and invested in the company earlier in 2006. After the IPO, the company claimed to have over €400 million in cash to fund further expansion, including aircraft purchases. In August 2006, Air Berlin acquired German domestic airline DBA. Flight operations at DBA were continued as a fully owned subsidiary of Air Berlin until 14 November 2008. When the DBA brand was discontinued due to staff strikes. On 28 November 2006, Air Berlin ordered 60 Boeing 737-800 aircraft and 15 smaller Boeing 737-700 aircraft. The combined value of the 75 aircraft was $5.1 billion. Delivery of the aircraft started in 2007. All of these aircraft were equipped with blended winglets to significantly improve fuel efficiency. 2007-2012, takeovers, expansion and new alliances. In March 2007, Air Berlin took over German leisure airline LTU, gaining access to the long-haul market and becoming the fourth largest airline group in Europe in terms of passenger traffic. This deal led to the introduction of Airbus A321 and Airbus A330 aircraft into Air Berlin's fleet. The merger of the LTU operations, aircraft and crew was completed on 1 May 2009, when the LTU brand was discontinued. On 7 July 2007, Air Berlin announced an order for 25 Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner long-haul aircraft with further options and purchase rights. 3 additional aircraft of this type will be leased from ILFC. On 21 August 2007, Air Berlin acquired a 49% shareholding in Swiss charter airline Belair, the remainder being owned by tour operator Hotel Plan. Following the deal, Belair's long-haul business was terminated and the fleet replaced by Airbus A320 family aircraft operating scheduled flights on behalf of Air Berlin as well as charter flights for Hotel Plan. On 20 September 2007, Air Berlin announced it intended to buy its direct competitor Condor in a deal that envisaged Condor's owner Thomas Cook Group taking a 30% stake in Air Berlin. A variety of considerations, including the rapidly increasing price of jet fuel, led to the abandonment of the deal in July 2008. In January 2008, Air Berlin introduced a new logo and corporate design. The logo is a white oval shape on a red background, where the letter A is a white circle and 2 white stylized wings. The text Air Berlin in the logo is now in lowercase and written as one word. Sometimes the slogan, "Your Airline," also features as part of the logo. In June 2008, CEO Joachim Hunnel defended Catalan language speakers when he claimed in an article included in Air Berlin's In-Flight magazine that the government of the Balearic Islands was trying to impose the use of Catalan on Air Berlin flights from and to Mallorca. He claimed that Air Berlin was an international airline and was not obliged to use Catalan. Hunnel went on to criticize the language policy in Catalonia and the Balearic Islands, claiming that at the time many children could not speak any Spanish. The Balearic Islands President Francesc Antich explained that his government had simply sent a letter to encourage airlines operating in the Balearic Islands to include Catalan among the languages used for onboard announcements. On 18 June of the same year, Air Berlin announced that it would reduce its long-haul services by 13% as well as cut 10% of services in the domestic market in an effort to increase profitability. In September 2008, Air Berlin confirmed merger talks with competitor TUI Fly but added it was speaking with all parties. Air Berlin had until 2007 been flying many code-share TUI flights. At the end of March 2009, Air Berlin PLC and TUI Travel PLC signed a deal by which their German flight businesses were to operate a long-term strategic alliance. Originally, each company was to take a 19.9% stake in the other, and the German cartel authorities were petitioned for approval. After the Bundeskartellamt expressed concerns, the cross-ownership plan was not implemented. Instead, TUI Travel PLC purchased a 9.9% stake in Air Berlin PLC using a capital increase at a subsidiary to do so. In January 2009, Air Berlin started cooperating with Hainan Airlines, China's fourth-largest airline. The airlines jointly market flights between Berlin and Beijing. The code-share flights are sold on a reciprocal basis, and operated under the relevant airline's own flight number. At the end of March 2009, a strategic partnership agreement with TUI Travel was signed with Air Berlin and its direct competitor TUI Fly, purchasing 19.9% of the other's shares. Following the deal, Air Berlin took over all German domestic TUI Fly routes as well as those to Italy, Croatia, and Austria. Also, all of TUI Fly's Boeing 737-700 aircraft were added to Air Berlin's fleet. Further route changes will see TUI Fly abandoning all scheduled flights and relying exclusively on the charter business. In March 2009, ESAS Holding AS, a Turkish company, bought approximately 15% of the voting shares in Air Berlin, to which the German competition regulator had no objections. Also in 2009, Air Berlin added Hartmut Medorn to the board of directors after his retirement at Deutsche Bahn. In October 2009, Air Berlin started cooperating with Bangkok Airways. Bangkok Airways flights can be booked on a code-share basis by Air Berlin customers. In April 2010, Air Berlin expanded its code-share arrangements with Russia's S7 Airlines. Air Berlin and S7 Airlines had been cooperating since October 2008. New services include code-share flights via Moscow to destinations such as Irkutsk, Perm and Rostov. In July 2010, Air Berlin announced an increase in its shareholding in the Austrian airline NIKI, following the fulfillment of the required conditions. The agreements notarized on 17 February 2010 have been implemented. Air Berlin indirectly acquired 25.9% of the shares in NIKI from Privatstiftung Lauda, and in doing so increased its current shareholding in NIKI from 24% to 49.9%. In connection with the increase of its shareholding, Air Berlin will grant the private Lauda Foundation a €40.5 million loan. The private foundation has the option to repay the loan in 3 years with cash, or through the transfer of the remaining 50.1% of NIKI's shares. In July 2010, it was also announced that Air Berlin would join Oneworld, the global airline alliance. In preparation for joining the alliance, Air Berlin began to offer flights under code-share agreements with American Airlines and Finnair, starting with the 2010-2011 winter schedule. Its cooperation with American Airlines means that Air Berlin passengers gain access to the American market, whilst it also offers code-share flights with Finnair to Helsinki. And within Europe, Air Berlin founded Follow Me Entertainment GmbH in September 2010 as a joint venture with Kick Media AG. This joint venture company markets image and sound media, books, games as well as events, concerts, tournaments and sponsoring. The foundations were laid for the first maintenance hangar at Berlin-Brandenburg Airport on 21 March 2011. Air Berlin, which will share use of the hangar with Germania when the airport is opened, has doubled Air Berlin Technic's maintenance capacity at its Berlin site. On 1 April 2011, Air Berlin completed the integration of LTU, which it took over in August 2007. There is now a single flight schedule, and all Air Berlin Group technical services have been merged into a new company called Air Berlin Technik GmbH. Also in April 2011, Air Berlin underlined the importance of its Düsseldorf hub by creating a new position of North Rhine-Westphalia Regional Director. It also added new routes, more frequent flights, and additional long-haul flights from Düsseldorf. On 15 June 2011, Air Berlin and British Airways reached a code-share agreement covering some flights within Europe. starting from 5 July 2011. The agreement applies to flights to over 40 European destinations served by the two airlines. CEO Joachim Hunold resigned from his position on 1 September 2011 and was succeeded by the former CEO of Deutsche Bahn AG, Hartmut Medorn, who led the company on an interim basis until January 2013. From January 2013, Wolfgang Prock-Schauer took over the position of CEO. Air Berlin has cooperated with the Italian airline Meridiana since September 2011 and has offered flights since 30 October 2011 with Meridiana between Italy and Germany. In November 2011, Air Berlin and Pegasus Airlines launched Air Berlin Turkey, aiming at the charter market between Germany and Turkey. Pegasus Airlines is the largest private airline company in Turkey and is 16.5% owned by SAS Holding AS, involved in Air Berlin. The new airline was absorbed into Pegasus Airlines on 31 March 2013. In the third quarter of 2011, the turnover of the company amounted to €1.4 billion, an increase of 11%. However, operating profit decreased by almost to 50%, around €97 million. As a result, a new bond to raise additional capital was issued. In November 2011, a marketing campaign was launched and further preparations to join the Oneworld airline alliance were made. In November 2011, Air Berlin took over the remaining 50.1% stake in NIKI in the repayment of a loan, and is now the sole owner of the company. The brand name is to be retained, and Niki Lauda was given a position on the board of Air Berlin. Air Berlin announced on 19 December 2011 that the Abu Dhabi airline Etihad Airways had increased its share of Air Berlin from 2.99% to 29.1% for a sum of €73 million, immediately making Etihad the company's largest shareholder. The deal supplied more cash to Air Berlin and provided Etihad access to Air Berlin's European network. Air Berlin became a full member of Oneworld on 20 March 2012. A move that was originally announced on 2 February 2012. Austrian airline NIKI, which is also part of the Air Berlin Group, joined Oneworld as an affiliate member on the same day. 2012-2015, restructuring amid continuing losses. The cooperation of the frequent flyer programs Top Bonus and Etihad Guest was announced in March 2012. In June 2012, the collaboration concluded with the bonus programs Air Berlin Business Points and Etihad Airways Business Connect for SMBs. On 20 March 2012, the announced entry into the airline alliance Oneworld was officially completed. The extended international network offers over 800 destinations in 150 countries. At the same time, the airline introduced the platinum status for its frequent flyer program Top Bonus. In May 2012, Air Berlin presented its new fare structure Your Fare in an effort to offer individual rates for all target groups. Bookings are available for the rates Just Fly, Fly Classic and Fly Flex for flights from 1 July 2012. On the 11th of May 2012, Air Berlin opened its tri-weekly non-stop flight from Berlin to Los Angeles in the summer schedule, a destination which until then had only been served from Düsseldorf. In March 2013, the Berlin-Chicago route started, feeding into American Airlines hub at O'Hare International Airport. On 18 December 2012, Air Berlin announced that Top Bonus, its frequent flyer program, would be sold to Etihad Airways. Only a 30% minority share would be retained. Air Berlin also announced the expansion of the existing code share agreement with Etihad Airways on 20 December 2012. This includes flights via Abu Dhabi to Chengdu, Beijing, Shanghai, Tokyo and Nagoya. In January 2013, the first Airbus A330-200 was introduced, with a new business class which enables a fully flat position for the first time. The long-haul fleet of Air Berlin had already been modified, with a business class of high quality in 2012. On 7 January 2013, Air Berlin appointed Austrian Wolfgang Prock-Schauer, former Chief Strategy and Planning Officer, as the company's CEO, replacing Hartmut Medorn. Medorn had held the position on an interim basis since September 2011. Air Berlin started flights between Berlin and Chicago on 23 March 2013. It cancelled the seasonal non-stop flights to Las Vegas, San Francisco and Vancouver. In March 2013, Air Berlin announced the closure of its seasonal hub for leisure destinations at Nuremberg Airport. Only 10 year-round direct routes remained. On 24 September 2014, Air Berlin cancelled all remaining 15 orders for their Boeing 787s as well as 18 remaining orders for Boeing 737-800s as part of their restructuring program. It is assumed that an all-Airbus fleet is planned. In October 2014, the Luftfahrtbundesamt denied Air Berlin authorization to operate 34 routes as a codeshare with co-owner Etihad from the 2014-2015 winter schedule, as they would contravene the bilateral traffic rights between Germany and the UAE. Also in October 2014, Air Berlin announced that it was terminating flights to Palma de Mallorca from both Bremen Airport and Dortmund Airport, therefore withdrawing entirely from these two German airports. Air Berlin announced a net loss for 2014 of €376 million. The airline's revenues in 2014 stagnated at €4.16 billion. In September 2015, Air Berlin phased out the last Boeing 737-700s owned by the company. The remaining aircraft of this type will operate on a wet lease basis from TUI Fly until 2019. All Boeing 737-800s are to be phased out by 2016, as Air Berlin plans to focus their short and medium-haul fleet on the Airbus A320 family to cut costs. In November 2015, Air Berlin announced the closure of its Palma de Mallorca airport hub by ceasing all Spanish domestic routes by 3 April 2016. It currently serves 7 routes within Spain from Palma, which are connected to several routes from Germany. Some days earlier, the airline announced plans to expand its long-haul network, with flights from Düsseldorf to Boston, Dallas, Fort Worth, San Francisco and Havana by spring 2016. However, the planned route to Dallas, Fort Worth was cancelled a few weeks later due to low demand. On 30 December 2015, the administrative court in Braunschweig ruled in favor of the German Civil Aviation Authority and against Air Berlin regarding some of their code-share operations with Etihad Airways. The shared sale and advertising of 31 out of 83 routes which are marketed by both has been declared illegal and needs to be stopped by 15 January 2016, as it is not covered by the bilateral air traffic agreement between Germany and the UAE. One of the routes which is no longer allowed to use an Etihad code share is Air Berlin's service from Stuttgart to Abu Dhabi. The Luftfahrtbundesamt had only allowed these flights until a definite legal ruling was made. 2016-2017 Restructuring efforts. In April 2016, Air Berlin announced a record loss of €446 million for 2015. The airline's revenues in 2015 decreased to €4.08 billion. Amongst the reasons considered: for Air Berlin's poor performance were crippling debt of over €800 million, unclear and rapid strategy changes on routes and advertising, several CEOs over recent years, a 5-year-plus delay to the new hub Berlin-Brandenburg Airport, failed negotiations to profit from lower fuel prices and the overall harsh competition in the airline industry. In July 2016, Air Berlin confirmed that it no longer owned any of the aircraft it operates, having sold and leased back the last of the aircraft it had previously owned. A few weeks later it was reported that Air Berlin and Etihad Airways were in talks with Lufthansa regarding the sale of some of Air Berlin's operational assets to Lufthansa, mainly routes outside of the hubs in Berlin and Düsseldorf, some staff and several aircraft leases. Lufthansa is reportedly considering integrating these operations with those of its own Eurowings subsidiary. In July 2016, Air Berlin announced the increase of flights to the United States from 55 to 78 non-stops per week for 2017. Besides some frequency increases, Los Angeles and San Francisco will be served from Berlin in addition to the services from Düsseldorf, while Düsseldorf will also see an entirely new route to Orlando. A few days later, the airline announced the introduction of a business class on its short and medium-haul flights. In December 2016, Air Berlin announced that their chief executive Steven Pickler will step down after serving 2 years as CEO. He will be replaced February 1 by former head of Germanwings Thomas Winkelmann. The new Air Berlin project. On 28 September 2016, Air Berlin announced radical restructuring under the project named the New Air Berlin. The airline will reduce its network from around 140 destinations to 70, and focus on the hubs in Berlin and Düsseldorf and 2 smaller bases in Stuttgart and Munich, with 6 bases being closed. Air Berlin will target business travelers and concentrate on flights to domestic German destinations, Italy, Scandinavia and Eastern Europe. It will also expand its long-haul business. The restructuring is also planned to involve the loss of up to 1,200 jobs. With a current narrow-body jet fleet of 118, Air Berlin, including its subsidiaries Belair and NIKI, plans to cut 40 aircraft from the fleet, leaving Air Berlin with its own fleet of 75 aircraft in future. If the deal is approved, 17 Airbus A330-200 for long-haul operations, while 40 Airbus A320 family aircraft and 18 Bombardier Q400 aircraft will serve European routes. A separate business unit concentrating on tourist destinations will also be formed, with 35 aircraft. This unit might be operated with a new business partner, with TUI Fly being the assumed partner, as they already operate several aircraft for Air Berlin, or sold altogether. The remaining 40 aircraft, including crews, are to be wet leased to competitor Lufthansa Group, which will use them for their Eurowings and Austrian Airlines subsidiaries for a period of 6 years. In October 2016, Air Berlin announced plans to close 4 of its 7 Air Berlin Technik maintenance facilities and lay off 500 of their staff. On 5 December 2016, Air Berlin announced plans to sell its entire 49% stake in its Austrian subsidiary NIKI to its own minority owner Etihad Airways. Simultaneously, NIKI and Air Berlin will exchange several aircraft to harmonize each fleet. It has also been announced that NIKI will take over several routes to Southern European, North African and Turkish leisure destinations from Air Berlin as part of the new joint venture. Also in December 2016, Air Berlin announced the transfer of its entire fleet of 21 A321-200s to NIKI and NIKI's transfer of all its 5 A319-100s and 13 A320-200s to Air Berlin. Air Berlin would discontinue its wet lease with TUI Fly. In the same month, it was announced that a total of 38 Airbus A319, A320 aircraft would be wet leased to Lufthansa Group's Eurowings and Austrian Airlines effective February 2017. As a result, lowering Air Berlin's restructuring costs. In January 2017, Air Berlin announced reductions to its network for the upcoming 2017 season, with most leisure routes either transferred to NIKI or cancelled altogether. Some domestic and European city routes are to be dropped, with the remaining reduced network focusing on the Berlin, Tegel and Düsseldorf hubs. On 28 April 2017, a loss of €781.9 million was announced for 2016, from a revenue of €3.79 billion. Also in late April 2017, Air Berlin confirmed the creation of Air Berlin Aeronautics GmbH, a new subsidiary which will possess its own operational license to take over the wet lease operations currently handled by Air Berlin on behalf of Eurowings and Austrian Airlines. Therefore, the actual Air Berlin will focus on the operations under its own brand name. In May 2017, Air Berlin announced it would buy Luftverkehrs Walter entirely, in which it had a controlling stake since 2009. Bankruptcy. On 15 August 2017, Air Berlin entered insolvency procedures after the withdrawal of ongoing support from its largest shareholder Etihad and the resignation of board directors appointed by Etihad. By late August 2017, a number of bidders had declared an interest in purchasing parts of the airline, including aircraft and takeoff and landing slots. All bidders were given a final deadline of 15 September 2017. On the 11th of September 2017, Air Berlin announced the termination of all flights to the Caribbean. By 25 September 2017, shortly afterwards, it was made public that leasing company AerCap had announced the repossession of 10 Airbus A330-200s leased to Air Berlin on short notice, leading to the termination of several long-haul routes. On 25 September 2017, it was announced that all Air Berlin long-haul flights would end by 15 October 2017. It was also announced that the board of Air Berlin had intensified talks with Lufthansa and its subsidiary Eurowings as well as EasyJet as the preferred bidders for major parts of the company. On 9 October 2017, Air Berlin announced to its staff that it would cease all remaining operations under its own AB flight numbers due to its negative financial outlook and bankruptcy proceedings. Meanwhile, all wet lease operations, mainly on behalf of Eurowings and Austrian Airlines, as well as the operations of subsidiaries NIKI and LGW, would be maintained until further notice. On 12 October 2017, Lufthansa agreed to buy 81 aircraft and employ 3,000 Air Berlin workers together for €210 million, taking over the subsidiaries NIKI and Luftverkehrs Walter with a total of 1,300 employees. Air Berlin's final flight will be AB 6210 from Munich to Berlin on an A320 on 27 October 2017. It is completely booked due to passengers' great interest. Ownership. Air Berlin PLC shares are publicly traded on Xetra and on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange in the regulated market. Trading in the regulated unofficial market takes place at the exchanges in Berlin, Düsseldorf, Hamburg, Munich and Stuttgart. Since December 2011, Etihad Airways has been the largest shareholder in Air Berlin. As of December 2015, major shareholders are Flight School, Air Berlin has been running its own pilot training scheme since 2007 in a joint venture with the TFC Kaufer Flight School. Trainees completed their commercial pilot training to the latest industry standards over a period of around 24 months. The Air Berlin Flight School was the first flight school in Germany to be awarded a training license by the German Department of Aviation for the new multi-crew pilot license concept in February 2009. Technical services. Air Berlin has its own maintenance and overhaul branch, Air Berlin Technik, with facilities in Berlin, Düsseldorf, Munich, Stuttgart, Frankfurt, Hamburg, and Nuremberg, which employs 1,300 staff as of October 2016. The technical branch is a certified ASA Part 145 maintenance organization, with approximately 1,200 employees providing services to both Air Berlin Group aircraft and customers throughout Europe. Air Berlin Technik is recognized and approved by various national airworthiness authorities such as USA FAA 145, Canadian CAA 145, Aruba ASA 145, Federal Aviation Authority of Russia GCAA, United Arab Emirates. In October 2016, Air Berlin announced to close the technical bases in Stuttgart, Frankfurt, Hamburg, and Nuremberg while laying off 500 staff due to restructuring measures. Destinations. As of October 2017, Air Berlin flies to 37 scheduled year-round and seasonal destinations in 14 countries in Europe and the Middle East. Long-haul flights. Air Berlin long-haul aircraft feature business and economy class sections. At the beginning of 2012, Air Berlin started the renewal of its long-haul cabin, equipping both economy class and business class with new seats and a new in-flight entertainment system. Fully automatic seats that could tilt up to 170 degrees provided high comfort in the business class in addition to an anti-thrombosis addition and an individually adjustable headrest and more legroom. Narrower seat back. The seat improves comfort in economy class. All seats have an 8.9-inch monitor that is easy to use per touch screen and offers a variety of movies, series, music, audiobooks and games. In January 2013, the airline again presented a new business class which replaced the one introduced a year earlier. Primarily, the new business class has single seats, thus offering travelers even more privacy. The new seats have a full flat function, a massage function and feature a 15-inch monitor. Short and medium-haul flights. Air Berlin did not offer a business class product on its short and medium-haul flights until the airline announced its introduction in August 2016. All short and medium-haul aircraft will now feature a designated business class in row 1, with expanded services including an empty middle seat. Passenger services. In contrast to pure European low-cost carriers, Air Berlin offered free in-flight snacks and drinks until September 2016. Newspapers and magazines are available on domestic German flights. Full hot meals are complimentary on long-haul flights on all Air Berlin routes. With a flight time of 60 minutes or longer, gourmet meals are offered which are, according to the airline, created by chefs at Zanzibar, a famous restaurant on the island of Sylt. The airline also offers in-flight entertainment, assigned seating, and guaranteed flight connections. Air Berlin's basic fares are both non-refundable and not changeable, so unused flights fares are a complete loss to the purchaser. Frequent flyer program. Air Berlin's frequent flyer program is called Top Bonus. Points known as miles can be collected on flights operated by Air Berlin, NIKI, Oneworld, Alliance Airline Partners, and selected other airlines. Accrued miles can be redeemed for reward flights or for an upgrade to business class. In addition to the entry-level top bonus card Classic, there are cards with silver, gold and platinum status corresponding to Oneworld, Ruby, Sapphire and Emerald statuses. A service card and a credit card for which a charge is made are also available. Etihad purchased a 70% stake in Top Bonus for €184 million in 2012. Following the insolvency of Air Berlin, Top Bonus also filed for insolvency on 25 August 2017. Accidents and incidents. As of August 2016, Air Berlin never suffered an accident or incident resulting in the loss of life or an aircraft in over 35 years of operations. However, there has been recent controversy regarding one of the airline's safety policies. Brought to you by WikiVidi.com. Would you like to know more?